Okay, there we go. Mute this a bit so that I don't hear myself. Once again, as we start this, I need to make sure that I'm blasting this out to all the different places. That is the wrong. Every time the thumbnail is not correct. October live stream. Come say hi. Go to Facebook. This is a very quiet video, I'm sorry. So, post. Okay. Hello everyone, welcome. Nothing that I feel super comfortable talking about right now, but just so that you know, there's a lot of weird life things going on in the background. So I'm doing this live video even while my world is falling apart. So how are you today? I hope that you are well and that you find yourself in a great position on this very beautiful Saturday that is here in Calgary currently. This is the October live stream. These are more laid-back videos where we can hopefully strike up a conversation and just feel like we are talking and riffing on one another. There's nobody watching here currently, but hopefully I get a few different viewers that show up here in just a little bit. I wanted to go through today just some of the videos that I've recently made, some stuff that I've recently been listening to and watching, and so hopefully yeah, we can just have a rounded conversation about that here currently. So let's start off by jumping right into it. Let's just talk about some of the videos that I've been making here recently and just like thoughts of why I made them in the first place, how they're actually going, you know, all that good stuff. Hello to the viewer who just signed on. If I had been proactive, I would have had this all queued up before I came. So since the last live stream, I've made a few different videos. Of course, I have the videos that are called Misc that happen on Mondays, and those are the ones where I kind of just usually review like a TV show, movie, that sort of thing that I'm consuming. So those are going relatively well. You'll also notice I am here in Media Lab. This thing that I don't stop talking about because it is my new business and I'm trying to actually make a thing that actually be successful. Some changes since the last time that you were here. I'll just upend my computer just for a second. I now actually have, if I turn this around, some actual editing stations in a nice proper grid formation. Hopefully you can actually hear me while I was speaking. And as I was turning this around, you'll notice that I have a green screen all created here as well. So people can come in and use that. Huge light, a little bit of a set that you've probably seen me sitting at for the last couple of videos here at least. And then I'm just sitting here at another table where it has another bit of an audio system rigged up so that people can kind of sit down with either their own computer or at least take that somewhere because it's already set up here a little bit. So that's Media Lab. Hopefully you want to come and visit it if you're in the Calgary area. But going back to the videos that I've created, so the big one was that Media Lab is here. That's the last, or sorry, the first one that I made after the last live stream. Oof, that's get your mind wrapped around that. And that was kind of introducing people to the concept, right? That this is the story behind it. This is why I created it in the first place. And that got some fairly good engagement. It had 68 views currently, 18 comments, and 12 thumbs up. So that's pretty great when it comes to the videos that I create here, at least. That's on the fairly high end of things. And what's nice about that was that people just seemed to be really excited about the fact that I was actually doing it finally. It was like months and months and months of me talking about it and collaborating on it and taking meetings and, you know, just seemingly like annoying a whole bunch of people. And it was finally a reality, and so I was able to make that video of kind of the soft launch thing. And then we are going to, fingers crossed, be having a grand opening sometime in the next few weeks. Here's the big hurdle that's happening here right now, and this is part of the frustration that's going on here right now. Is this is the green screen, the way it's set up, and the little set that I have going on over here is mostly because I had to improvise a little bit. The audio booth that we currently have is for the one person, and what we wanted to have as well is another audio booth with multiple people, and then a kind of a whole kind of staging area where that would be the video wall, where it would have different backgrounds that you can use with the lighting and the microphones and everything set up. Well, because of the construction length of time and things happening, those are probably not going to get built until maybe end of November at the earliest, but probably not until like the beginning of the year. So I kind of was moved in, and I was like, well, I mean, I need something to be here other than just the one audio booth in order to make this look like a fully fleshed out area where people can actually start to create things. So that's me going and basically spending money I don't really have, but that I need to have so that it's all set up properly. So that was that video, the Media Lab video. The one that came after that, the main video that came after that, was kind of like the hard one to make. That was the one that was called R.I.P. Grandma, an ode to Betty Bateman. So my grandmother passed away. Not that it was 100% unforeseen. Here's the thing about my grandmother, and because I read the eulogy in that video that I then read later that day to the assembled people, which people seem to like it, so that's the good thing. It was hard in a way because nobody wants their grandmother obviously to pass away, but at the same time she's been in this like what I call the old folks home. That's probably not the official name, like retirement home or assisted living home, whatever you want to call it. And my grandma was very active. Like loved sports. She would like walked everywhere that she wanted to go to. Never drove, but walked many miles every day. Was still very active up until into 90, until she was 90. And then there was a few different things that happened. One, she tripped and fell and really banged up her face. And then she started having these kind of bladder problems, bladder infections, which seemed to like make her go a little bit loopy and not remember things 100% properly. And then it just seemed to like devolve from there. So she went to the hospital this one time, and she never went back to her house. She went like from there directly into this old folks home. And she was good on some days, but then not good on other days. Like it seemed like dementia or some sort of thing. Dementia was or Alzheimer's, something like that was starting to creep in because she was starting to forget things, not remember people's names. It was often when I went to visit her, she would seemingly know who I was, and then midway through the conversation, I could tell, I don't think you know who I am, or think I'm someone different in the family because she is in a different time and place, so she thinks that I'm either younger than what I should be, or I'm my dad. There's sort of things like that where she just was getting kind of confused. So I made that video. As you can remember from the stats that I had on the Media Lab one, this had a little bit less engagement, maybe because people just don't want to feel sad. 34 views, 8 comments, 2 thumbs up. I mean, no one really wants to thumb up, hey, yeah, your grandmother passed away. So I'm sure that had something to do with it. But I'm really happy with the way the video turned out, even though it's like not the most super professional looking thing in the world. The next video that came out was called Obsessed Over Turtles All the Way Down. And this is one that I was very strategic with. And Grant just logged on and says, "You didn't go to Stanford." Grant, yes I did. I visited for an entire afternoon. I'll have you know. Turtles All the Way Down. I was very strategic with this video because the new John Green book came out, and I knew that people are obsessed over John Green. I mean, I'm obsessed over John Green, so I made sure to go out and buy his book the day that it came out. I read it in less than 24 hours, and I made the video the very next day. So I kind of cobbled together that whole video so I could have it up 2 days after the book was released, because I knew people would be searching for those search terms. So this saw like a giant spike upwards of of engagement, because this had 139 views, 10 comments, 11 thumbs up. So interestingly enough, we have that one, which had way more views, but less thumbs up and comments than the Media Lab one did. So it's always interesting to see what people do. They want to either thumbs up or comment, or if they just want to watch the video and go on to the next one. Grant, nicely enough, informs me that an afternoon at Stanford is about as useful as 4 years studying English, which means very. Yeah, so that's that was the Turtles All the Way Down video. I don't know if you've read Turtles All the Way Down. I would very highly recommend it, especially if you are someone who does confront mental illness or have that in your life. I think it's a really well-written exploration of that. This is specifically looking at people with either OCD or negative thought spirals that people get into. So it's an interesting look at that. This last video just came out this Thursday. It was entitled Toxic Masculinity. It has a big old face of Harvey Weinstein on it. 46 views currently, 14 comments, 12 thumbs up, but 1 thumbs down. So there's someone out there that did not like my talk about toxic masculinity. This is one that I felt compelled to make, which doesn't necessarily happen a whole lot. A lot of times when I make videos, it's like, oh, like I'm thinking of this, or I'm reading this, or I want to make a video about a specific topic. But this one, there was like the Harvey Weinstein thing was happening in the news, and I was seeing like just a bunch of news reports, and then it came out, like I heard a tape that someone had recorded of him and an actress together, about him trying to get her into his room. There was more and more people coming forward, and then there seemed to be this huge domino effect of other people in other places of power and other media organizations that were also being pointed at as saying like they're doing kind of the same thing. So it seemed like this huge explosion that was happening in both the zeitgeist and the culture. So I was like, I really need to make a video about this, only because this is all I'm obsessing over, all I'm kind of thinking about here currently. And so I made a video about that whole thing. Partly I'm disappointed in it because the camera that I was using, the new camera back there, the GH5, I'd used it on the Turtles All the Way Down video, but for whatever reason I didn't have my focusing dialed in right, so there's parts of that video where I'm completely out of focus, which is unfortunate. But as my mantra goes, I upload on Thursday even if I'm not ready to upload on Thursday. I am the quantity over quality every single time, which is why I'm so popular. It was good though. There was a lot of people that responded to it. I got actually a bunch of private communication about this video in particular, about how it affected people, and then yeah, just how people thought it was a good topic to jump into and discuss. So those are all the videos that I've made here since the last live stream. I do have a plan for the next few. This is always subject to change, I find, because it's always I'm always not 100% of. I plan things and then I decide, I don't want to do that now, or there's something else that makes more sense. Right now, the next 3 are I want to make Why Halloween is a Great Movie, so the first Halloween movie by John Carpenter. I want to talk about copyright specifically in regards to YouTube. I think there is still a lot of miscommunication and a lot of misunderstanding of what is in copyright, what is not in copyright, and how people balance that as creators. So I have someone that is here in Calgary that I want to try and collaborate with to make that happen. And then I've just called it Remembering Remembrance Day, the next video after that, which they don't call that down in the US. I believe you call it Veterans Day. But up here in Canada, they call it Remembrance Day, which is all about honoring our servicemen and women over all the different wars that have happened in our history. So that's what you can foresee here in the next little bit, in the next few weeks, which should be exciting. The couple of you that are watching, if you do have questions that you want me to answer, we have like another 10 minutes here together, so why don't you enter in any questions you are dying to know about me. And it does have to be at least PG-13 appropriate. Yeah. The other big thing that I wanted to talk about, I guess I don't know big thing, but I was listening to a bunch of podcasts, so I'm like podcast obsessed. And one of the ones that is like super popular out there is the WTF podcast, which is hosted by Mark Maron, this stand-up comedian. And normally he interviews like top comedians, either stand-up or just comedic actors. But recently, over like the last couple of years, he's really been interviewing way more musicians because he's just a fan of music and rock music specifically. So he had Marilyn Manson on in his last episode, and I found it absolutely fascinating. And I know that Marilyn Manson, obviously just like Alice Cooper, is not that persona 24/7. It is very much a stage persona. That is what they do on stage when they're performing, and then when they're out of there, they're probably like a normal human being who has to go and buy eggs and milk from the grocery store just like everybody else does. They just worship Satan before they go. So, but his conversation was really interesting, and I remember vividly him talking about how much he was like vilified in the press and that kind of stuff. But I remember myself being in my teenage years, I'm pretty sure I was like about 13, 14, maybe 15, when he was like super popular. I was definitely in high school when it was happening, and he really, really freaked me out. I'm trying to find it because there's this cover that he did for Rolling Stone that still is emblazoned in my memory. And let's see if it's going to pop up here, because this is part of the thing that just freaked me out. Yeah, this one right here. Let's see if that's a high quality picture right there. Hopefully you can see that. But that is I remember this cover vividly being on there, and I was getting into reading more music criticism and movie criticism at that time, and I really wanted to read more Rolling Stone just because it had this, like, I don't know, mystique around that magazine. And if you don't remember, Rolling Stone used to come in like a really awkward size. Like, it was really wide and it was really tall. They've now slimmed it down to be like a normal magazine size when you go and buy it from the newsstands. But back then it was like huge. It was like a huge magazine that you were reading all the time. And so that cover specifically, when that came out, like, it just freaked me out. Like, at that point, like, I was like super closeted. I was trying to be like the goody two shoes all over the place, and like, he really represented this idea that was like corruption. Like, it would corrupt me to my very soul if I even listened to that music. Of course, you could barely get away from it because it was like all over the place. Like, everyone was blasting it from either their cars, or it was on the radio, or it was on TV when you did it. It was just that that symbolism that he had, that he was something other, that he was something evil. There was something wretched about him. And then, you know, you grow up and you're like, oh, he's just like an act. And he mentions that a little bit about meeting David Bowie. And of all people, I'm sure David Bowie was just looking at him being like, yeah, you're just doing this thing. you are this persona on stage. Because, I mean, David Bowie went through how many, 4 or 5 different personas that he would, like, represent. The Thin White Duke and Aladdin Sane and all the other different ones and manifestations that he had. So I think people understood it. Like, the Alice Coopers of the world, the Kiss of the world, they could understand that this was just an act. And that he's just this, well, normal guy who does kind of weird things in his personal life. And I don't know, it just makes me think more about how we present ourselves, not just to other people, but online. And if we do get up in front of people, like, how that is all interrelated with one another. I feel like this is a video idea that I just need to explore a little bit more. But I find it endlessly fascinating, the personas that we have in different areas. And does that make us a fractured person, or is it just different ends of a spectrum? Are we all the same person at all times? It's just we are allowing our certain selves to be shown at specific times. This might get too more philosophical than I wanted. Grant also mentions here in the chat that when I was younger, I wanted to take over for Peter Travers. So yeah, Peter Travers is the film critic in Rolling Stone magazine. I'm not a huge fan of his writing, to be honest, but he has some interesting ideas every so often. I follow him on Twitter, so he posts, or I did follow him on Twitter. I don't know if I still do. he posts interesting op-eds and information. There was actually, during that time when I was really into Rolling Stone, Matt Taibbi, who was the political correspondent, was the guy who I liked reading, because you could tell he was just pissed off about everything that he wrote about. He just hated it. Grant just clarifies, I didn't like him, I liked his job. Willie White is here, and he mentions, never assume you know someone. People don't even know themselves, so you'll almost never be right. It's a good quote. I'm guessing that was Charles Dickens who said that quote, or someone. We'll say it was Charles. All right. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I really wanted to delve into here today. I like doing these live streams mostly because it feels like it's just a low-key chat that I get to have with a few people that are just ogling me, undressing me with their eyes, probably. Hopefully not. There is a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff here at Media Lab that I did this week. So obviously I got this green screen that I set up over here to my right. Got a bunch of new extra batteries from a GH4 or GH5, I should say, and I might be getting a second GH5. Oh, Grant asks, have you seen all the Halloween movies? So going back, I said probably my next video is going to be why I think Halloween is a great movie, like the first Halloween movie. So I've only ever seen the first Halloween movie. I have not seen a single other sequel. Not that I haven't seen clips from them, and in fact, the James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, he did an entire series of reviewing every single one of the Halloween films. So I've seen clips, I know the plots, I kind of know where everything ends up. It goes much more supernatural by the end of the series than what it starts off as being, and I kind of like the non-supernatural aspect of the story more than it being like demons and stuff that people have to now go and fight off or fend off. So Halloween is so great, and not to ruin the video so much, but I think what I like so much about Halloween is that you're never supposed to be rooting for the killer. You're always wanting the people to escape, and I find that even with like Nightmare on Elm Street, ostensibly that's what the first movie is supposed to be. Like, you're not supposed to side with Freddy, but everyone kind of does. They kind of make him this cool villain, even though he's a child rapist. And definitely in further installments of that series, it's really just, okay, here's a bunch of people, and Freddy's just going to go one by one and kill them all off in interesting ways. This is kind of my big criticism, too, of the Saw franchise, which I just recently watched the whole thing through, which, except for the first one, where you can at least kind of have an interesting argument or debate with people about, is Jigsaw justified in what he's doing? By the time like even the second and third one come out, you're like, okay, like he's just setting this up to just kill off a bunch of people, and we as an audience are supposed to be like, yeah, those people are getting killed, and it's really cool, interesting ways in how they're being killed, and I just feel awful watching that type of content. So I don't know. William asks, are you going to watch the new Saw? Yes, that is actually partly why I'm watching all the Saw films. Hadn't seen a single one. Really had no desire to. And then this group, this YouTube Calgary group that I'm helping kind of admin for, that's one of our monthly meetup things, is we're going to go and watch a scary movie, which happens to be Jigsaw this month. And so I thought I should probably familiarize myself with what is actually going on in the other movies. So I watched them all. So yeah, I'm just not a big fan. Oh gosh, there's Nightmare on Elm Street, and then the one that has Jason in it is called Friday the 13th. So Friday the 13th films are the exact same way for me, which is that, again, it's just a bunch of counselors, young guys, young people, and then you're just watching Jason just like slice through them and kill them, and it's not an interesting movie to me in that case. I think there's just so many other interesting ways that you could approach this, and what Halloween does is that you spend a lot of time with the Jamie Lee Curtis character. You sympathize with her, you understand her, and so that you know when she eventually gets into the house where Michael Myers is, you're like, oh, you need to get out of there. And there's this one scene in particular that I think is just such a brilliant shot where you think she's vanquished them, right? but he's dead. And she's sitting on the stairs. He's in the background, out of focus. And then the great music like pings in. He sits up silently, gets up, and she's just sitting there like heavy breathing. He's walking slowly behind her. And then she starts to go down the stairs, and she doesn't know what's going on behind her. And there's this really interesting moment where you're like, you need to run. You need to run so fast right now because you don't understand what's about to happen behind you. So that suspense and that intensity, I think, is just something that's lacking in a lot of horror films, where it's just mostly jump scares or needless gruesomeness that happens, and that's what constitutes most horror films when I go and see them, at least. Although I will say that I think that there's a bit of a renaissance happening with horror films, because we've had It Follows, The Witch, A Ghost Story. Like, there's been some really interesting takes on the horror genre over the last couple of years, which I think is a step in the right direction. I think it's really intriguing and an interesting way to go about it. All right, my chickens. I'm going to be signing off in probably another half an hour or 40 minutes. If anyone here is a part of my Patreon, I'll be doing a Patreon-only live stream, so we'll continue part of this conversation over there, I am sure. Oh yeah, William White points out Get Out, sorta, which I agree. Like, it's just kind of a subversion of the horror genre completely. So it's interesting what people are trying to do within horror specifically. Regardless, we'll see each other soon, definitely on Monday and Thursday this week, and then another live stream next month. So until then, don't go to summer camp.